Welcome, welcome. This is Marnie. I'm here today with Tallis Strub, and we're going to be talking about inspired morning transformed lives. We're going to discuss how to come to worship, and it might surprise you what Tallis suggests, how to truly honor God, add one component that will enhance your worship. Aren't you curious? Also, how to get and stay consistent and why it matters, and how to adopt a lifestyle of prayer and praise. Our guest today is Tallis Strub. She's a Christian podcaster, speaker, dancer, and founder of the Arise community. She's leading us into joyful celebration today of who we are, ready to arise and shine his light for his glory. Her website is whenwearise.com, and you can also invite her to speak via womenspeakers.com. I'm super excited to welcome you here. Hi, Tallis.
Hello, Marnie. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you. And I love my morning routine, and you do too.
Yes.
We have found, both of us have found that starting the day in a consistent way with Jesus at the middle changes everything. It just changes everything. Yeah, it changes how the rest of the day falls out. There's a saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And it's really important for us to not only be on track with Jesus from the very get-go of our day, but also to have him be at the center of the whole day, to be modeling and mentoring that behavior for those who are watching us, whether it's little children or those around us.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yeah. Yes.
Good. So your ministry is called Arise, Mornings Arise, and we are going to be talking about how having an inspired morning can transform your life. So as we begin, I'm going to tell you first, and then I'm going to pass it to you, that before I even open my eyes, I am talking to God in the morning before I open my eyes. I just wake up in the presence of God, consciously aware of that. And I start usually saying the Lord's Prayer. And I usually I personalize it very much. And I usually start saying, hi, Daddy, or morning, Daddy, or something like that. And then I go on to thank him that he's in heaven and not stuck down here with us, and that he has perfect perspective, and he has perfect power, and he has perfect provision for the day, and how I love his name. And sometimes I'll just spend time and go through his names. And I just love, even before I get out of bed, beginning the day with Daddy. So now when you say come to worship, tell us what your practice is. And of course, it's different from mine. Everybody has a different way. But tell us what your practice is and why.
Well, the practice of Arise really started in a time where I was needing to be nourished with that time with the Lord. I was not a new mom, but a young mom. I had 2 babies, and I was at home full time for the first time ever during the pandemic. And while I had already been a Christian and I'd already had some different practices that I was doing inconsistently in the mornings, I did not have a set morning routine. And it was at that moment when everything got really constricted that I knew I needed something new. And so I had this dance studio that was closed during the pandemic. And I started sneaking out of the house before my kids were awake, before my husband needed to get to work. And I would go there and I would turn on worship music and I would just talk to God. And that was my prayer time, because I found that if I were just to go down to my living room while my family was still sleeping and sit quietly with my Bible, there's nothing wrong with that. But there was a piece of me that wasn't being included in the party. And that was my body from the neck down. Like, I'm a mover. And I had no idea, Marnie. I've been a dancer my whole life, but I had no idea what incorporating dance into worship would do to me. I had always compartmentalized it. I've been like, I'm a dancer. This is part of my job. It's a hobby. And then I go to church and here's my prayer life. And I had never married the two.
Yeah.
And it just became this like rocket fuel to set me up, not only with the right mindset of talking to God and praying through my prayers and having that devotional time, but to incorporate every piece of myself, my entire body into it. Yeah. It was like, I mean, caffeine has nothing on that, it's just like,
I love that.
Then I feel unstoppable. So
yeah. Right. The one thing you were talking about before was when you come into worship, just come as you are. Yeah. And I think it's critically important that we understand God already sees it all. We're not surprising him.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not. And like I said, I was trying to devote time to the Lord to start my day, but I was almost doing it like I thought I should, or like everybody else was doing it. I
Yeah.
would buy the most beautiful, journal or devotional book, and I'd open it up, and I just felt like something was missing. And it was because God made me to be a mover.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I invited that part of me that he gave me into the equation
I love that.
that it was good. Like
Mhm.
I was fully present. I had given everything. And I had also, looking back, I think I had allowed that part of me to be sanctified as well.
Mm.
Dance had always been about performance. It had been about career. I had musical theater background. It hadn't really been invited to this
Mm.
holy time with the Lord. And so
Mm.
you're right. We have to come as we are, and we have to come as the who that he made each of us to be.
Yeah, because the next thing we want to talk about is truly honoring God. And I think that's part of it. A lot of times, what God asks for from us is that we will be our authentic selves, who He made us to be for His glory. That's what He's actually
Yeah,
asking us to do.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, that holiness, right? I always think of like, um, while we can be saved in a moment, we have to be sanctified over a
Yeah.
lifetime. And so, it is a process, but that holiness kind of washes through. And I think, not everybody calls themselves a dancer, because we think of it like a skill that you either have or you don't have. But it doesn't matter the how good it is. I think he's given all of us a whole body for a reason, and it is his, whether we like it
Yeah.
or not, right? And
Yeah.
so when we don't allow that rest of us from the neck down to be part of the party for him, I think we
Mm.
can feel a disconnect.
Love it. Yeah, I'm very much of a elliptical runner. So we have an
Ah,
elliptical in our Florida room, and every morning, I get up and I have a routine that I do with my
uh-huh.
people around the world. And then before I take a shower, I always go out and I have three things that I take with me. It ends up being more than that, but I take
Mhm,
questions that Jesus asked that I ask him in my life
mhm,
every morning. And then I take out some scripture, like usually 2 pages full of scriptures that have
mhm,
been really meaningful to me. And then I take out
mhm,
2 or 4 pages. I call them AM review sheets. And these, I have these are from journals from sometimes decades ago,
yeah.
things that God has spoken to me over the years that I want to remember, that like I really want to remember that day when he talked to
Mhm,
me about, you know, uh,
yeah.
being in the clouds or whatever, whatever it was. And I just have those come up in random order, and I just grab from the front of the folder, unless he tells me to pick something in the
Mm,
middle. And I put that on a clipboard, and then I go out on my elliptical and I run, and I just spend that time with Jesus. And
yeah.
it's exactly what you're saying. When we engage the body in the fellowship, in the worship, it changes it. It's like music. We move to the other side
Mhm,
of our brain.
mhm,
It
mhm.
opens up our heart in a different way. It's just so, so important, God, that I love how you said, honor him
Mhm.
with your whole body, not just your brain, your whole body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what is one component that will just enhance your worship?
Well, I think, for me, it arrived somewhat naturally when I
Yeah.
realized, oh, this is something that feels so true to me. Why don't I just incorporate that in my time?
Yeah.
What I find for women who have now been invited to do this with me is most of them, if not all of them, do not consider themselves a dancer professionally.
Yeah.
Maybe they took ballet classes growing up, and so they're finding a return to that hobby.
Mhm.
But this, as a component that's added into it, enhances, like we already talked about, because you're increasing the blood flow, and that's part of what he's given us as a body. But I
Yeah.
do think that we can kind of get stuck in our ways, so sometimes we like check the box, we're going through the motion, and it
Oh.
could be as simple as turning on a beautiful piece of music, of worship
Mhm.
music that was made, that was written to glorify God, and allowing that to lead us. So
Mhm.
when women come to try Arise, I always say, there's no prerequisite for this. You don't have to, have dance classes, dance experience, because actually dance is in our DNA. As we look back, almost every indigenous culture has dancing as a part of
Yep.
it. It's in
Yep.
us. We read in Psalm 149, 150, bring to him your praises with dance, sing in his name, praise with dance.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would be there if it wasn't ingrained in who we are.
Yeah.
I think what gets in the way is this.
Yeah,
We tell
yeah.
ourselves like, oh, I've seen Dancing with the Stars. It's supposed to look like that. No, it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's an
Mhm.
enhancement from within. And
Yeah.
if we focus on what we've already talked about, glorifying him and putting him at the center and inviting every part of us, then the word dance kind of fades away. And there's not so much pressure to do something right or wrong.
Yeah, I love it. And it takes off the pressure to pay attention to the dance itself and to just move.
Yes. Yes.
So your
Movement is a
brain
great,
and
yes.
your heart is still engaging with God while your body is moving.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes. And I do think there is something, it's hard to put into words, but there's something that happens even to me after all of these years of doing this now. There's something that exudes from us when we allow ourselves to take up space physically in the name of God, in the name of the Lord. I have actually been told by other women that do this practice with me now that they will lay out their clothes for work that day. One woman, she laid out this gray pantsuit on her bed, and then she signed on, did a rise, because it's all virtual. And the cameras are off, by the way, so I can't see her. But she's doing this. She's dancing with God. She's having this amazing dance party, and she's in it. And then she goes back to get ready for work, and she's like, I don't think it's a pantsuit day. I think it's a sundress day. And she puts on this bright yellow sundress because now that matches how she feels and how she wants to show up in the world. And I just think that's such a great testimony for what can happen when we allow our whole selves to be part of worship.
I love that. I love that, going from a gray suit to a yellow sundress.
Yeah,
that
right?
really is, whenever we spend time with Jesus in a way where we feel safe, we feel nurtured, we feel loved, how do we not come out changed? We always come out changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask you a question just for you personally. When you begin your own Arise dance in the morning, do you have a little routine at the beginning? Like, do you always say a scripture or start with praise or shut your eyes for a moment? Or how do you begin?
I do. I always start with a prayer. I always ask that God would be present with me. And in those moments of just asking for his presence, I can then be directed to a focus. Because if I wake up and I have my own focus, there's a long agenda. But I always ask for his focus. And then whatever it is, I just fixate on that. And I pray that whether what comes to me as a problem or an opportunity, that through our time, through my dancing, that it'll get worked out. Because so often what happens is, as I start to think and ruminate and even worry about whatever it is that might come to mind, even if it's a good thing, then I start to hold tension in my body. And so I always start with just a moment of prayer. And then that devotional, I might choose like a psalm to read through. Sometimes I have a devotional that I'm going through, and then I read that to start. But there's always that, I don't just jump right into the music and the dancing. There's always that centering focus. And it's kind of changed throughout seasons or whatever's going on in my life. I've done this through 2 pregnancies. And so it's just kind of, it's changed. But I do have a playlist. Like, I have a playlist that is a go-to. And then I usually start the same way. And there's something ritualistic if I start with very similar movements every time. It just tells every part of me, like, okay, it's time.
And it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah, it's no different than like a professional athlete that goes through their same warm-up routine before a game. That's how I feel about it now.
I love that. And I'm thinking about, one of the things I always tell a new speaker is select something to wear that you're comfortable in. And that looks nice, then you feel good in, but it's comfortable. And then also always start with a very strong story or something that you're very comfortable with. Like almost, you should walk out with your strongest thing. So that once you get it rolling, then you can relax into the space. And it's very similar with what you're saying. If you start shaky, It can maybe all be kind of feel awkward or whatever. But if you start with something you love, just this morning, I do the same morning. I always ask God, what am I focusing on today? This morning it was Psalm 91, and I just spent some time rewriting that in my own words just to personalize it before the day got going. But when we spend time before we get even cruising into anything, just asking God, what do you want me to focus on here? And I'm just here for you. I'm here to hear from you. I'm here for you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marnie, there are days where I don't start my day like this, and I miss it, if you will. And I find that I do show up differently. There's been times where my husband will say, "Oh, today was an Arise morning, wasn't it?" Because he can see that extra energy, that extra, that Holy Spirit life in me. Whereas maybe if I have a slow morning or somebody's sick at home and it's just, I don't start the day that way, there is a true difference. And as we were talking about the way you start off, it's so true. I get up and I do Arise intentionally because I'm here to win this day. And I know that that's the best thing to get me going, to show up the way God wants me to in this day. And I think that's so true when we set ourselves on stage, when we do an interview. You have to practice like you want to play. So we've got to have that warm up routine, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love it. When you started, you said, when I miss it. And I was thinking of the word miss. And I often say that, like, if a morning is crazy or something happens or whatever, and I don't get my time with God, I don't get that particular, even like he's with us all the time, right? He never leaves us or forsakes us. But we have these things with our spouses, with our kids, with our friends that are our routines with them. And we look forward to them, right? And when I miss it, I miss him.
Yeah.
I miss him. And the day keeps going and he's still with me and everything, but I miss it. I miss that structured time to get really focused and on track with him. And so, I totally hear what you're saying. So let's talk about consistency then, because one of the things that helped me most when I was a young parent, we had some people come in to do a conference at our church. And they saved me because I was so beating myself up about not being able to be consistent in my parenting. And they said consistency isn't doing it every single day or every single time. Consistency is doing it so often that if your child or if someone else was to watch your life, they would say, I can just about tell you what she's going to do next right here, because you're so consistent. And it doesn't mean every single day.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's so true. And like my husband notices when I first started this practice, I didn't know what it was. And he definitely didn't know what it was. He knew I was sneaking off to go to this studio by myself.
Who's she meeting?
Yeah, right. He had no idea, but I would come home and not after the first time or the second time, but after several weeks of this routine, I did it at least twice a week where I would actually leave the house. He was like, what are you doing? And it was a good change. He was like, I like what I see. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
so you're right. It didn't have to be every morning, 7 days a week, but it was consistently week in and week out. And I think that's what's important to remind me and others when we do something new. We might try it and go, this is a little funky. But if we can try it again and start to allow it to become a habit and change us, that's when we really start to see that consistency compound over time. Nothing is one and done, right? If you just get up tomorrow and you read your Bible and you go, oh, that felt great, but then you don't do it for a year, you're gonna notice like that didn't really do much for you, did it? So I do think that when we're trying something different or something new for the first time, we've got to allow space for that to become a routine. And it doesn't have to be a daily routine, but you're right. It does have to be often enough that it sticks and we start to see a change.
For years and years and years, I did 21-day wins to just launch a new habit like this, where you just say for 21 days, I'm going to be very committed. I'm going to hold myself accountable to do it every day. For 21 days. We always would include an allowance. So if, let's say, someone's sick, or if we have out of town guests or whatever it is, you can make your own allowances. They aren't cheats. They're just allowances. Life happens. But otherwise, you're going to hold yourself to it. What happens is if you can get yourself to start with a very high level of consistency, then you can move into this life happens kind of consistency going forward. It helps to just launch it very, very in a committed way. So you're telling your brain, who hasn't been doing this all along, and your brain's like, yeah, well, it must not be important because you've never told me to do it again before, rather. So clearly, every time we've started, we've stopped. So clearly, this is not important to you. I'm just going to wait for you to get distracted, and then we will go back to status quo, and we will forget about this new thing you've got going.
Right.
But if you do it for 21 straight days, your brain starts to take notice. Your subconscious brain starts to notice that this is something I really am serious about. And so when you're launching a new habit, you really want to lock it in there at the beginning in a very consistent way, and then move more toward a freedom way. Just in the fall, in November, I hurt my legs so bad, and I actually was flat on my back for a couple of days, and then moved into more and more strength. And it was so exciting to me when I could get back on the elliptical, even just a little bit. And then, more and more now back to full strength again. And when you have it as a habit in your life, then what happens is, instead of your subconscious fighting you to do it, your subconscious fights when you don't do it. It actually starts fighting for you. You want to do this today because you know how you're going to feel when it's over, right?
It's it's physics. It's that objects at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects at motion stay in motion. And so you're so right. Your body goes, wait, we were doing a thing, and it wants to move.
It wants to move. It definitely wants to move. Yeah, we were created to move. I always say the one person I don't see in the Bible is the one that lays on their bed and says, thank you, God, for waking me up. Now have a good time doing my day. And I'll meet you back here. I'll just lay here all day while you go do it. It's just not how God made us. He wants to flow through us, but he needs our bodies. He actually needs our bodies to move, to accomplish his work. So I want to go back real quick before we move to the last point here. I want to go back to getting started. So I know that, for some people who have been extremely sedentary, or dance is extremely, let's say, intimidating or something like that, what would be a good, minimal engagement starting point?
Well, two thoughts come to mind. One is good music moves us. It just does. I mean, look at babies. It's in all, as adults, we start to get in our heads and we kind of shut ourselves down more or less. Babies, no, they don't have it. Kids till age 6, usually you put on some music and it's just innate. So I think start with music you enjoy. If you haven't been used to dancing and you haven't been moving much, turn on some music and let that work through you. Let it invite you in. The other thing, is with a practice like Arise, I've always set it up so that it happens virtually and everyone's screens are off but mine. So I'm giving an option of what you might do if you were dancing, but I always remind women, your way is the best way. I'm just giving you one option. And I've heard from many that sometimes they stand and sway. Sometimes, it looks nothing like what I'm doing. But so I use the word dance because that is what it is. That's what I'm doing. Right. But it's not like, if you think of a Zumba class where everybody is being asked to do the same choreography together, not quite it. I'm inviting everyone into more of a dance party that looks very different wherever you come from. So
I love that so much. I love that so much. And I know for me, this started, I don't know, when my babies were little, I would just get up and put my tennis shoes on. And that was always the signal to my body that we were going to move now. This is the signal. We're getting ready to move.
Yes, I call it costuming. Costuming is very important. It comes from my theater background, but it is. If you are telling yourself that today's an important day, you're going to dress differently than keeping your pajamas on, right?
Absolutely.
So that is such a good point. I get up, I change my clothes, and whether I do it at home or I drive to the studio, there's that process that's getting me ready. That's saying, okay, I'm actually preparing to do this practice today. So I love that idea. I think if you have kind of a fun, pair of pants or something that you feel good moving in, dancing in, put those on, turn on the music. That's wonderful help.
Yeah. And even before I go to bed at night, I always put my tennis shoes and my little shorts and top in the bathroom there, so that in the morning, as soon as I'm in the bathroom, I am get
Yeah.
dressed while I'm just waking
Yeah.
up and
Mark
going.
Mark Batterson does that. You know Mark
Yeah.
Batterson?
I
He
don't.
he he's a pastor and a writer of many books, but he
Okay.
talks about and draw the circle and win the day, about
Okay.
how he puts his tennis shoes out the night before. I'm
Yeah.
not a runner,
Right.
so I don't do that, but
Yeah.
I know you're not alone in that.
Yeah. No, whatever you can do to help your brain understand that you're serious about this. And I'm not
Yeah.
kidding about this. Your brain, the way God made us is so beautiful. Habits are
Yeah.
so wonderful. We would die if we didn't have our habits because there's too
Mhm.
many choices to make during the day. But the
Right.
thing about habits is that the body is set to keep you at a stable pace. That's how God set us up. So when we start to fall, our
Mhm.
hands go out, or when we're hot, we sweat. When we're cold, we get goosebumps, like that. So all of this is happening very
Mhm.
subconsciously. It's all just happening. And one of the things that's happening is that your brain is telling you, I really don't want to make a new habit. I'm so
Yeah.
good right here the way we are. So
Yeah.
anything you can do to help move your brain out of just this comfort zone that we're here in and to this new pattern that you want to adopt in your life, it's going to help. And don't give up too soon. It takes
Yeah.
over 60 days for that new habit to just become part of you, and then even a year for it to really become, so you don't think about it anymore. You just do it every day.
Just second nature.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that about choices, because I think one thing that I've found personally, because I spend a lot of time thinking and analyzing things, is when I jump into this practice of arise first thing in the morning, it eliminates all of that decision fatigue for me. And because dancing actually communicates to our nervous system safety. Like if we are dancing, we are
Mhm.
either in the upper position. You think about tribes who would dance to scare away another tribe. So it's either a position of strength or it's a position of celebration. Neither
Right.
of those are fear based, right?
Yeah.
So when I dance,
Like,
I'm telling my nervous system, all is well. So by the end of that time, I usually do it
yes,
for about
I love it.
45 minutes. My brain is like, what could go wrong today? I have no hard decisions to make. Apparently
That's
everything's
great.
good, so that is
Yeah,
such an
that's
important
awesome.
piece that personally I have found to be such a benefit. I've
That
got a
is
lot
so
going on.
fun. I love
Yeah.
that. I'm thinking now about me running, and I'm hoping I'm not running away from something. I think I'm always running towards something.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the science on running so much, but
That's so funny. So that we want to just close here talking about how to adopt a lifestyle of prayer and praise, not just a good morning start, but I've been talking a lot lately about the name Yahweh, the name of God, Yahweh being
Mm,
breath, and it's YHWH is how it's spelled, and it's just in and
yeah.
how we
Yeah.
breathe
Mhm.
Jesus, we can just breathe God, which is so
Yeah.
incredible. And then to just incorporate the prayer and the praise into the day like a flow, like the waves of your life, and you're not thinking of him and then you are thinking of him, and he's always just
Yeah.
right there, and he's just a prayer away. Yeah. So when you think about adopting prayer and praise as a lifestyle, what are your thoughts there? How do you actually incorporate it into your day?
Well, I've certainly integrated much more praise and worship music.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm not offending anybody when I say this, but Christian music has come a long way. It's like
It has.
amazing. Like it's incredible the music that is being written to glorify God these days. So there's no shortage of wonderful, beautiful Christian music. And so I find that, that is a background, a soundtrack
Mhm.
for me to be praising God
Nice.
in a
Hmm.
carpool situation, in a heavy work day where I've got a
Hmm.
bunch of stuff to do at my computer, but I can have it on in the background.
Hmm.
I love and I'm so grateful for musicians and people who write this wonderful
Yeah.
music, because whether I can actually like get up and fully dance in that moment or not, that is something that keeps me focused on prayer and
Hmm.
praise. And it
Hmm.
could be any time of day
Yeah.
or night. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think always, one of the things I always teach at conferences are when you feel danger, 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 call on Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. He's right
Yeah.
there. He's right there.
Right.
And let your emotions help you identify when you need to pray, when you need to. I always use a dolphin analogy. Dolphins are water dwellers, but air breathers. We are earth dwellers, but prayer
Mm,
breathers. Anytime you feel
yeah,
like you're suffocating, it just means you haven't gone up for prayer in a little while. You need to get some
right.
air. So
Yeah.
breathe the air of prayer, just constantly breathing
Mhm.
Jesus, but not, it's back to that consistency piece that we started with. It's not like constant. You don't have to every minute of every second of every day be saying Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You don't.
Yeah,
It's okay. Just live and just
right.
connect with him constantly throughout the day. Just whenever your emotions are high, low,
Yeah.
whether you have a question, if you're concerned about something, just run it straight to Jesus. That's why we have emotions, is to draw
Mhm.
us to Jesus. And you think about all the fruit of
Mhm.
the Spirit, they're all emotions. Do you feel loving? Do you feel peaceful?
Mhm.
Do you feel joyous? These are all emotions. And so when you're lacking the fruit of the Spirit, and when you're feeling instead one of the negative emotions, fear, anger, frustration, whatever, just remember, this is just God, Jesus knocking at your heart's door saying, come on, let's talk about this, because I have a different perspective than yours right now. God
Yeah.
is always at peace, inviting us into his peace.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know sometimes it can be the case that, at least it is for me, that when I am feeling those really heavy feelings, the words don't come so naturally, and sometimes there's this pressure to be able to pray and be so eloquent every time, but that's not the case.
Mm-mm.
And again, I lean so much on movement and music because I may not be able to vocalize what I need to say
Right.
in that prayer, but I can sway to a song,
Right.
and I can still lift up myself in worship in that moment despite whatever heaviness is going on.
Yeah, I love that I had the picture when you said sway and worship. I had the picture of a mother holding a baby.
Oh,
She doesn't need to
yes.
say anything. God
Yeah.
doesn't need us to say anything, and he doesn't need to say
Mhm.
anything. We just need to know he's there.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, right? And then
Mhm.
sometimes we need his input too. Well, this is so fun. We are out of time, but I want you guys to know you can find Tallis over at whenwearise.com. When they reach out to you over there, what are they going to find at your website?
There is actually an Arise Unlimited with a free trial. So if you're listening to this and
Woo-hoo.
you're like, this sounds kind of fun, I want to test it out, you absolutely can. There's a video on demand with a free trial. You can just sign up and test it out. I also do have some lives coming up starting in February. And I am a speaker. I love and I facilitate Arise in person. If you have a group of women, there's
Fun.
information there about how to connect with me. So I'm just grateful to be here, Marnie. Thank you so much for this
Oh,
platform.
thank you. This was so fun. So again, it's whenwearise.com or womenspeakers.com. You can find her over there at Tallis Strub. Okay, thanks, Tallis. Great. Thanks for being here.
Thank you,
Th-
Marnie.
Thanks, you guys, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.